A couple of years ago, the pair got engaged when they learned something very freaky about their families. While going through family photos during their engagement party, they found photos of their parents together. Turns out that Steven's father and Helen's mom had actually dated and were set to get married in Korea in the 1960s. But their parents' disapproved, so they didn't. Had they not disapproved, the couple would have never been born. Not only that, but what are the odds that they got together after their parents had already gotten together? Kinda awkward if you ask me. Moving on at number 9, we have the church fire. On March 1st of 1950 at 7:25 p.m., a church exploded in Beatrice, Nebraska. At 7:20, a choir practice had begun, except none of the 15 choir members were there. And it's lucky that they weren't, or else they would have perished in the fire. Turns out that all 15 members arrived late due to personal reasons. So they were nowhere near the church when it exploded. What are the odds that all 15 members were running late? This story could have ended in tragedy. Thankfully, it didn't. Moving on to number 8, we have the wedding vows. In 2007, Fred and Lynette Dubendorf were walking along a beach clearing up some litter when they found a message in a bottle. After they opened it, they found it contained the marriage vows of another couple. Upon closer inspection, they found that their marriage dates matched. The couple who created the vows in the bottle were married on August 18th of that year. The Dubendorfs were married August 18th of 1979. Both couples were also married on beaches. The Dubendorfs were in complete shock and actually reached out to the other couple. Thankfully, the couple left their address in the bottle. Both couples now believe that their marriages were meant to be, especially Matt and Melody, the couple that wrote the vows in a bottle, who had several failed marriages before finding each other. They were skeptical about getting married again, but this to them is a sign that it was meant to be. Moving on to number 7, we have Edgar Allan Poe. This is one of the freakiest coincidences I have ever read about. So in 1838, Edgar Allan Poe wrote his only complete novel. It was called The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket. The book was about Arthur Pym, who goes on a nautical adventure. He hops on a boat as a stowaway and hides out there. But while aboard the ship, a mutiny occurs and a number of crew members lose their life. There's only 4 members aboard the ship now. One of the men was named Richard Parker. They kept him alive to help them control the ship. However, they encountered a terrible storm and things went south. The remaining 4 people on board are struggling to find food. So Richard was like, let's draw straws. Whoever gets the shortest straw will be killed and the others can eat them. So they did as Richard said, and he ended up drawing the shortest straw and then was eaten by his crew members. Believe it or not, but 46 years after that book was published, this happened in real life. In May of 1884, 4 men were traveling from England to Australia when they found themselves fighting for their lives. The men decided to draw straws and see who they should eat. The cabin boy drew the smallest straw. What was the cabin boy's name? Richard Parker. The same name as the guy who got eaten in the book. What are the odds of that? Is Edgar Allan Poe a psychic, or did he write history, or both? Moving on to number 6, we have Redbox. This story comes from Matinee25 on Reddit. A couple of years ago, her and her friend went to Redbox to see if they could rent the movie Tron. For those of you who don't know what Redbox is, basically it's an American video rental company that has these little kiosks you can go to and pick what movie you want, and then you can rent it and you'll get the DVD. So they went there, but they found out that they didn't have Tron. So they were like, okay, screw it, let's just rent another movie. Well, when they opened up the DVD case, turns out that inside was the movie Tron. Someone had put it back in the wrong case. But what are the odds? Because that's the movie that they wanted to see in the first place. Like, out of all the DVDs they could have gotten, they got the one with the switched disc. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the lucky numbers. So this story comes from Yamletef on Reddit. According to them, they were working as a call center operator when they asked the caller for her birthday. The caller said it was April 20th, which was the same birthday as the operator. When the next caller rang in, their birthday was April 27th, which was the same birthday as the operator's brothers. So at this point, the operator was like, okay, what is going on? And then the caller told her that maybe it's a sign and that she should go play the lottery with those dates. And that night, she went to the grocery store, played with those numbers, and ended up winning. It was only $380, but still, that's better than nothing. What are the odds that the winning numbers correlated to the caller's birthdays? In our fourth spot, we have the birthdays. According to a woman named Carrie Lee Simmons, her and her best friend share a number of eerie similarities. First, they both have the same birthdays. Not only that, but turns out that they were born in the same hospital, and their mothers shared the same recovery room. Keep in mind that their mothers were complete strangers. Then, 17 years later, the two connected and became best friends. When they found out that they were practically born beside each other, they completely freaked out. That's how you know that friendship is meant to be. In our third spot, we have the sign. This next story is from Reddit user EricFP23. So, the day in which her grandfather died, her mother had been sitting in bed next to him, comforting him. Before he passed, she whispered to him, "Tell Richie I say hi." Richie was her ex-husband who had passed away a couple years earlier. A couple of days after her grandfather's passing, Erica and her mom were at Walgreens when all of a sudden a huge truck drove by with some writing written on the side of it. It read, "Richie says hi." I am speechless. Like, that's just goosebumps. And Erica and her mom were speechless too. It's either just a super eerie coincidence or Richie sent that message from the grave. Moving on to number 2, we have the taxi driver. I'm sorry, but this one is a little depressing compared to the other stories on today's list. In 1974, a man was riding his moped scooter in Bermuda when he was struck and killed by a taxi. 1 year later, his twin brother was riding the exact same scooter when he was struck and killed by a taxi as well. The taxi was driven by the exact same driver who took his brother's life. So not only did the twins die the exact same way, but they had been killed by the exact same person. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the life savior. When Su Weifang of China was 50 years old, he was outside near a river by his home when he saw a boy drowning. So he jumped in and saved his life. 30 years later, he rescued another boy from the river. This boy had slipped and fell into the river and didn't know how to swim. Once again, Weifang jumped in and saved this boy's life. Well, turns out that the two people he saved were related. They were father and son. 30 years ago, he saved the boy's father from drowning. Then, he saved the father's son from drowning in the same river. So they believe that this man is their guardian angel.
Number 10, twins named Jim. Okay, we'll kick this part 2 off on a lighter note. This one gets a little dark, so we'll ease our way in, you know? The twins named Jim. Okay, that sounds like a 2026 comedy hit already. Back in 1979, a set of twins were reunited when they were 39 years old at the time. This was, of course, a big moment in their lives. For 37 years, they barely knew of each other's existence. Then when they finally met, the long-lost twins had more in common than they could have ever thought. For starters, both had been named Jim. I spoiled that in the fun title earlier. But their adoptive parents both named the lads Jim. That's insane. Jim? Like, of all names, really? And both Jims just happened to love math and carpentry. Both also had jobs and security. And both also had ex-wives named Linda. And they both since married a woman named Betty. This isn't like, what? Imagine meeting another you, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I also love knitting and Autobots. What are the odds?" No, that's too eerie. You're an alien clone. Something's afoot here. Get out of here. Not just meeting a long-lost twin at 40. No way. Number 9, Stephen Hawking. Time is relative and fascinating and all that confusing stuff. There's so many components of our universe that we still don't even understand. James Webb is out here making people turn to atheists all of a sudden. The universe is bigger than we all think, yet somehow it still gives us these once-in-a-lifetime coincidences. Or as I say, coincidence. Stephen Hawking's death occurred on Einstein's 139th birthday, which is also Galileo's 300th death day, and also Pi Day. This was March 14th. My dad has the same birthday as Daniel Radcliffe, and they're both wizards, so I don't know. Just saying. These birthday coincidences are getting out of hand. Coincidences. There it is, he's got it. Number 8, atomic survivor. On August 6th and 9th, 1945, the United States detonated 2 nuclear explosives over the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This, of course, was devastating. The results in this reaction, the blast and the radiation they both caused, took the lives of nearly 90,000 people. It was horrible. But in 2009, the Japanese government confirms that there was at least one man who was in each city on both days of the reactions, and he lived to tell the tale. On August 6th, Satomu Yamaguchi was in Hiroshima on a business trip. As I was walking alone, I heard the sound of a plane. Just one, he told a British newspaper. I looked up into the sky and I saw the B-29 and it dropped 2 parachutes. I was looking up into the sky at them and suddenly it was like a flash of magnesium, a great flash in the sky, and I was blown over just like that. And by August 9th, he had returned home to Nagasaki only to experience the trauma for a second time. Despite the double radiation exposure, Yamaguchi lived to be 93 years old, which is incredible. He sadly passed away from stomach cancer. Number 7, Julianne Kopka. Miss Julianne has a 2-for-1 when it comes to survival stories. I had to include it. Her story starts out on Christmas Eve, a lovely day, 1971, when she was just a teenager and she was on Lanza Flight 508. Now the plane was struck by lightning, which is an actual nightmare situation that I didn't know could happen, and this led to the plane starting to disintegrate midair. It was all bad. In what felt like the blink of an eye for Julianne, she found herself still strapped to her seat 2 miles above the Peruvian rainforest. She was injured, of course, full of bruises, a broken collarbone, but she was alive after she landed. And in fact, she was the only person who had been on the flight that was still alive. Just fell out of a plane and lived to tell. That is crazy. That is bat insane. But it's like you're out of the fire into the frying pan at this point, right? Now you're in the wilderness all alone with no food, just, a little bit of candy, if anything, from the plane. Julianne had found a small stream which she began to wade in downstream. She traveled along it, and the insects in the jungle were eating her alive, and sorry, this next part is gross, but maggots had infected her arm. It was like bad, worse, even worse. Now we're flowing down a river and maggots are eating me. This is incredible. Julianne ended up coming across a sort of encampment where she found a few supplies, and she was so smart and was able to give herself a little bit of first aid, which included pouring gasoline on the infected arm, which then led to all the, disgusting bugs and maggots leaving it. Because they're like, hey, I'm not a fan of gasoline. Lunch is over. See you later. And then just a few hours later, a few lumber workers found her, and they gave her more first aid treatment and took her to an area that was more populated, where she was then airlifted for medical treatment. Now, in 2000, her story was told through the documentary titled Wings of Hope, which was directed by Werner Herzog, who particularly took interest in the story because, one, it's obviously incredible, as I was just explaining it. I read this and I'm like, it's crazy. But two, Werner Herzog also had a seat booked on that flight, and he would have been on that same flight if it wasn't for a last-minute change of plans. That should be number 1, really. Number 6, Comet family. Okay, this one's good. The odds of being hit or killed by a meteor are 1 in 2 million, or something like that, right? It's crazy. But even so, back in 1954, residents in Talladega County, Alabama, noticed a ball of fire heading towards the Earth. Now, back then we didn't have Twitter, right? We couldn't warn anybody that a meteor was possibly gonna hit us. We also really didn't know if it was gonna hit or not, or how big it was, so it was alarming. Especially for Anne Elizabeth Hodges, who got hit by said space rock. Yeah, she only got grazed, but with these odds, it's still possible. Wild. Now, cut to recent history, the Comet family in France. Their house was hit by a meteor. I'll say that again. The Comet family was hit by a... You get it, there we go. As somebody with the last name McWaters, I'm a little worried that I might drown now. I don't know. Last names seem to be a little bit of a tip-off, it seems. And number 5, World Cup. An episode from The Simpsons back in 1997 called The Cartridge Family shows Mexico and Portugal going head-to-head in football. Like soccer football, not like, football. You get it. Springfield residents are told to go see this match to determine which nation is the greatest on Earth, Mexico or Portugal. So when the 2018 World Cup then rolled around much later, pun intended, fans were excited that this was now coming true, but at the same time had a laugh determining that Ronaldo must have missed that penalty intentionally so that the prediction would come true. That's like the theory now, that Ronaldo missed to make The Simpsons correct. A lot of theories for that one, it's always fun. But recently it's been announced that Qatar will host a tournament in November and December 2022 rather than usual June-July dates. Another World Cup, another chance for The Simpsons to add another prediction to their already impressive list. That's a creepy show. I have another Simpsons one coming up, but we'll see. Number 4, Mars life. We're back. There it is. There's the next Simpson one. That fast. There we go. Let me ask you lovely people a question. If you could go to Mars right now with like 3 of your friends, would you do it? Keep in mind it's really boring, and unless you're an astronaut botanist like Matt Damon, you'll probably have a rough go. But in the future, would you do it? I would. I'd go.